I'm Mia Ridge. I recently joined the Digital Scholarship team as Digital Curator. This prize is a special award to recognise outstanding individual effort. Okay, this is awarded to James Heald. His work has had a huge impact, not least because it links several different projects. It's linked the library's digitised 19th century book illustrations on Flickr Commons with the library's Georeferencer interface that makes digital spatial data out of maps, with efforts to post records to Wikimedia and Wikipedia. As you've probably seen, the images don't have a lot of information about themselves when they're online in that form. So James has coordinated massive volunteer efforts to manually find and tag those images. And then they've been organised into geographic and synoptic indexes. So all this work has made the images more discoverable, which in turn has led to them being more used in Wikipedia articles and places around the web. 50,000 maps found through this effort can now be georeferenced and therefore made even more useful for researchers and purely just for the joy of looking through these maps. It's a fantastic effort that's made a huge contribution, and it's a reminder of the hard work that still goes into making digitised collections accessible. We've heard about some fantastic methods of kind of machine processing records, but we're not there yet. So coordinating and explaining to people and inspiring them to do this work still is a really important part of the process of getting images online. And like many of the presentations today, it's linking creative work by people with systems run by computers to hopefully make the most of the best of what people do and the best of what computers do. You can find the work online, but I think now we'd like to hear from James, who can tell us more about his work.
Okay, so let me tell you a bit about the Mapping the Maps project. And I do want to give huge thanks to Ben and Mahendra for creating the million images in the first place, and also to Kimberly Cowell from the BL's map department, who's not here today because she's gone back to the States where she's now taken up a dream job there. But she was the one who got the BL's Georeferencer program up and running in the first place 3 or 4 years ago. So an awful lot of this would have been impossible without her, and she was a huge push towards getting enthusiasm and making things happen. So as we've heard, million images were put online just over 2 years ago now, and it's a fantastic resource. But the metadata, as we've already heard, is very limited to, ideally if you want bibliographic data, author, title, date published, but very, very little at an individual image level. So when Wikipedia heard about it, they actually said, no, we don't want them, because what's the point of having 1 million images if nobody can find anything in them? So Wikimedia turned down a bulk upload. But that's not the end of the story. What can you do to make it easier to find things? So we had titles. So first up, build an index to the titles. And it was a very geographical collection. So the obvious thing was to make a geographically structured index. So now, if you want to find a book about, in the collection with images about a particular part of Europe, a particular part in the UK, it gave you a start. Initially, this was done by hand. Then I realized there was actually a pattern to the class numbers, so I could add the rest of it automatically. So there's actually 2 indexes there. That doesn't really matter. An index doesn't have to be perfect to be useful. It just has to be a finding aid. And once you have a finding aid, you can then do things with it. So a fabulous thing was that then encouraged particularly a German volunteer to go uploading entire books worth. He went through, and whenever there was a book he liked, he would upload and clean up and describe all the images in it. And he uploaded over 20,000 images in a year, which is a fantastic effort, particularly when they are such wonderful images. But the actual description to the categorization process so that you make them discoverable in the Wikimedia Commons system is manual and very, very time-consuming. So was there a subset of these images? Was there anything that could be done more automatically? And a set of images that does particularly lend itself to a slightly more automatic categorization process would be maps. Because if you had the coordinates of the maps, a map of France is a map of France. Okay, there are different sorts of maps of France, but you can at least get them in a category of maps of France, and then people can find them. And this tied in very well with what Kimberly was doing with the Georeferencer project here, where she'd already done a number of runs that had been very successful and was then looking for more maps to find. The only problem was we had 1 million images, but we didn't know, we knew there were a lot of maps in there, but we had no idea which of the images were maps. So a huge needle in a haystack problem. So the first step was to find the maps in the Flickr system and put in a map, encourage people to go through all the images on the Flickr system, all 1 million of them, and to tag every one that was a map. How to do that in a structured way? Well, the approach was to use this index of the titles that we'd already built up. And for each title, there's a pink tag it's just a wiki page here. So add a pink tag to it, which has a link to all the images from that book on Flickr, apart from the maps, which have already been tagged. And to get people to tag maps, and then when there were no more coming up through the pink tag, to remove that from the page. And we started just over a year ago to this weekend with Mahendra christened it the Halloween Maps Tagathon, because it was the 31st of October and came up with some wonderful things which were called Ginger Dead Men, which are still very fondly remembered. We had a gathering of volunteers just over the way in this building, some talks about maps, some talks about libraries, a lot of tagging going on. And so if we look at the time lapse, even on 31st of October, you start to see the pink tags disappearing. 3rd of November, more of it had gone. And like all of these things, it's very much a social machine. It's how you build people into the process and keep them inspired. And that was a wonderful way to kick it off and to get it going. And so by the 19th of December, you can see this page didn't have a single book left on this part of the index. That still had any maps on it. We'd found all of the maps on this part. And if we look at the overall progress page, again, you can similarly run a time lapse here, October the 31st. We didn't actually have any idea how many maps we were looking for. We thought that 10,000 would be a good bit round number to encourage people to get. But then 40%, and we'd already found 8,000 maps, so maybe time to bump up the number to 20,000, except what you do when you start closing on 20,000. Well, 25,000? How many thousand? And in fact, we found 30,000 maps. That wasn't the end of the story, because Mario here had already, who you've just heard of, had already single-handedly found another 20,000 that he'd beat us to. So in all, 50,000 maps discovered through the process, going through all the images in just over 2 months. So what's the next stage? What we've got from the titles is a rough idea of what a book is about. But for instance, the discovery of Nova Scotia actually has a map of Exeter on it, because that's where the particular explorer featured in that chapter of the book starts with. So what we want to get is more detailed at a maps level, and this is where the georeferencing comes in. Again, we're using a similar approach. This gives the current figures about 9,000 out of those now georeferenced. Breaking, and we're using the different index pages to group together maps by the subject title. You click on one of these tags, you go to a Flickr page with all the maps that have that come from that particular book. That's been tagged up on Flickr, and that they're maps, and that they haven't been georeferenced yet. So Flickr, just from tags, can automatically pull those out from you. You can then choose one of the maps. These are all ones of France. And Ben has added this link here, which I'm hoping you're all going to go at home and do some of this. So that's why I'm telling you just how to get into it. Ben has added a link to all of the maps on the system, which takes you to the Georeferencer service. And here, this is that had already been set up by the British Library with a firm called Clocan, out of Switzerland. And here the idea, I don't know if you can see from the slide, is to try and find points that match on the old map and on a new map. And so the idea is to put a pin on the old map and correspondingly a pin on the new map. And once you've got about 20 or however many you want, the system then lets you see whether you've got it right, and to put the old map on top of the new map. And if you have got it right, they fit. You can zoom in, zoom out. Oh, sorry, how do I go back one? Never mind. You can fit, if it fits, you zoom in, you zoom out. You can fade it up and down to see just what's changed and just what's happened. I think they say that addiction is when you get a small reward, and that makes you then go back and do the next one. And it can be quite, for people like that, they like that kind of thing, it can be quite an addictive process. So from the georeferencer, we're getting the map's location. We're also getting a detailed idea of how large the map is compared to the area on the ground. So we can see from whether it's a map of France or a map of Paris or a cathedral-sized map, we can use this division that is actually the OpenStreetMap zoom level, or we can put the two together. So these are the maps at scale 4, and you can see this is basically most of Europe. Maps of scale 5, you're getting countries like the UK, France, Spain, Italy. Scale 6, and we're getting England and Scotland and Greece. And scale 7, we're now starting to get Ireland, smaller regions, Switzerland there. Scale 8, you're starting to get regional county maps. Scale 9, smaller areas, and so forth, until you get down to maps of cathedral-sized things, maps of buildings, smaller. And I think 21 is the Tower of Ely Cathedral, which is about 12 foot by 12 foot. So these are binary divisions, and you go all the way from scale 1, which is the whole world, to something that's a plot of the size of Ely Cathedral. So that's great, but we'd like to take it a step further. We'd actually like to be able to have named geographical entities. And we can actually achieve that. The way that we're doing it is with using place name lookup systems like OpenStreetMap's Nominatim. And so doing the center point and then 4 towards each of the corners, I implemented a voting system. So it looks up the address for each of those points on Nominatim and sees how much of the address agrees between the 5 points. And I take 4 as a good enough thumbs up that that's right. So this is definitely in Europe. It's definitely France. Not much consensus beyond that, but it means we can add a Europe tag to this. We can add a France tag to it. And that's really what you need. Having tagged a region, you can then pull out all the things that belong to that region at a particular zoom level. So these are actually searches. Again, the tags are on Flickr, so now anyone can do the Flickr search. This is for Europe at scale 3, and out you're getting continent-sized maps of Europe. Or you can do countries. This is the UK at scale 5. Nations, this is Scotland at scale 6. Cities, this was actually Glasgow at scale I can't read because I can't read the URL bar. And these are various things at Edinburgh at different sizes. So you can choose whether you want a map of the whole of Edinburgh or buildings of a particular scale in Edinburgh or buildings of a particular scale in Scotland, or whatever. It's all easily retrievable using Flickr tags, and by putting these into groups and classified things, that's then ready to be uploaded to Wikimedia Commons. The Wikimedia Commons category system is a complete nightmare, so there's still a bit more work that needs to be done before the stuff is actually getting uploaded there, which is my homework to be getting on with. But, and there's also, I should mention, live data being downloadable of all the maps that have been tagged and geo-identified so far. And so links on this page at Wikimedia Commons, com:/BL maps. So if you want to know more about the process, that's the link. And now it's time for tea. But do have a go at the georeferencing, because it is surprisingly addictive, and we've still got 40,000 of them to go.